Cameras like this today come with that much tech, and it's all designed to help you take better photos. However, recently this one feature on the Sony cameras actually ruined my photos. Can you see what's wrong with these photos? At first glance, possibly not. But if you look a little bit closer, look at the wobble. And there I was reviewing the photos on the back of the camera thinking, what's wrong with my camera? Was it broke? Is it just a bad camera of choice? Feel free to insert any Sony joke there you wish. And I sat around for a fair bit thinking, what could it possibly be? I never noticed it before on any of the photos that I'd taken. But then I realized something. There was a feature that I had changed on my camera, and I suspected it had done this. That one feature was changing the shutter from mechanical to electronic. So what is an electronic shutter? What does it do? Why should you use it? Or in some cases, why you shouldn't? An electronic shutter is pretty much what it says on the tin. In a camera, you've got something which is called a curtain, and this curtain comes down and goes back up at the beginning of every photo and at the end of every photo, depending on what your settings are. Now, these curtains are fairly fragile, especially on these Sony cameras. The amount of times, it's almost daily, I see on Facebook forums and groups saying that the curtain on their Sony camera, especially the A7 III and A7 IV, has malfunctioned and broke. Now, this type of actuation with a shutter is a mechanical shutter. And whatever you do, don't ever touch that curtain. Ever. Don't blow on it, don't do anything with it, just leave it alone. And here's another little tip. Something I read the other day is that if your curtain closes when your camera's turned off, keep a lens cap on your lens when you're not using it, because the sun can actually go through the lens and actually burn the curtain. Great design, eh? However, when you're using an electronic shutter, this curtain isn't used at all, but your camera will still take a photo. Completely silent. Nobody will know you're there, nobody will know you're taking photos. No distractions in them really quiet moments of events like weddings. Plus no vibration in the camera if you're wanting to do a long exposure, so technically more potential in getting sharper photos. And if you're like me and thinking the way I thought a few years ago when I came across all of this, that's a no-brainer. Why would you put a fragile piece of equipment through all that stress if you didn't have to? Not including all the benefits you get with it. However, as you saw from some of the photos, it's a little bit messed up. And this problem seems to become worse the higher the resolution of the camera. For instance, on my 61 megapixel camera, that has much more of a warp, or I guess you could say a rolling shutter if you was to do the same thing in video, than what something like my E7S III has, which only has 12 megapixels. Now, this is all down to the sensor read-off, and I may be wrong, but I swear that the A1 and the A9 and the A9 Mark II doesn't have this problem. But if I'm wrong with that information, then I apologize. Now, this sensor read-off, or the warping, or the rolling shutter, I guess you could say, isn't the only downside to using an electronic shutter. On these cameras, there is something called anti-flicker. When you're taking photos in certain lighting conditions, it's not normally outside, it's normally when you're inside when you're using artificial lighting. You may start to see some flicker in your photos. What this will look like is little zebra lines going across your image. And as you take a burst of photos, them lines actually move either up or down your photo. If you take a photo of a light, sometimes part of the light will be brighter in some areas than others. And overall, it just makes your photos, one, look inconsistent, and two, look a little bit weird. But the anti-flicker option inside the Sony cameras helps you get rid of that. How? Again, I have no idea. I'm not Gerald Undone, unfortunately. However, this anti-flicker feature isn't available when you're using an electronic shutter, only the mechanical shutter. And it's a similar situation when you're using flashes or speed lights like this. These won't work if you're using an electronic shutter. They only work with a mechanical shutter. By the way, the electronic shutter shouldn't be confused with the electronic front curtain shutter. The electronic front curtain shutter is another option in Sony's ever-growing menu. On all of my cameras, this has only ever been set to on, and the curtain only comes down at the very end of the photo. But if you want to set it to off, then it just means that your curtain will come down at the very beginning and at the very end. Again, I'm not really sure why flashes only work with a mechanical shutter. I don't know whether there's actually any physical way that you could do it with an electronic shutter. I don't understand the physics or the technology behind it. I just do whatever the camera tells me to do. However, if you're using a Sony camera, you should definitely take into consideration whether you're going to be using an electronic shutter or just moving to a mechanical shutter for the foreseeable. As always, this will depend on what kind of situation you're in and what you're wanting to achieve with your camera or your photos. However, if it was me, I'd always use a mechanical shutter because the benefits of electronic shutter definitely don't outweigh the mechanical shutter benefits. So I hope this has helped. There's plenty of videos coming over the next few weeks. So if you want to see them, hit the subscribe button. And if you do, I'll see you right there. Thanks for watching.